Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is time for the Chapman & Co. Leadership Institute webinar. Assess your new lineup. Are your people playing the right positions? And we are going to jump into this. And to do that, I need to introduce my co-facilitator. For those of you that have been on some of these webinars, we have a good time introducing each other, but I'll do this in a little bit more serious way. She is one of the most influential businesswomen here in St. Louis. She serves on board. She's been with Barry Waymiller and an architect of the Barry Waymiller University inside of our parent company. She and I launched the Leadership Institute about 6 years ago, and we do consulting with organizations of all types and sizes around the world. So if I were to just give you her kind of MO, her personality right in a nutshell, this is the Ivy League smart, this is the Queen of England classy, this is the Joan of Arc brave, the Mother Teresa caring with just a touch, a hint of Beyonce badass. She is the managing partner of the Chapman & Co. Leadership Institute. This is Sarah Nicole Hanna, and she's going to come off of mute and say some nice things now.
I don't know what to do with myself when you give me a serious introduction. So that's just totally, it's an unfair curveball. As we go into this, my co-facilitator for today is Matt Wyatt. Most of you who have been on these know that he comes from a background in the United States military, leading, building, rebuilding teams, and to the point of this webinar, assessing the strengths of each individual and ensuring that people find themselves in the right position. And so if there's anybody who is an expert in what we're about to walk you through, it is Matt, and he will be sharing that expertise with you.
All right, fantastic. Really quickly, the Chapman & Co. Leadership Institute, we are a full-service consultancy. We're actually not just the content we're going to give you today is not just content we use with our clients, but it's also we use it internally, both on our team inside of the Leadership Institute, and we're housed under a bigger company called Barry Waymiller. We're a capital goods manufacturing organization. And so the stuff that we're going to give you, not only are we qualified to show and give it to clients, but we use it on ourselves and within our organization as well. So this is the work that we do. Everything from assessments, and you'll see some of those individuals so that I understand what's the lineup, what's the team that I have, leadership development, everything from frontline aspiring leaders to C-suite. Training courses, diversity inclusion would be a good example, customer service, workshop keynotes, and also consulting. We'll share some upcoming events we have at the end, but we're going to jump into this. Some housekeeping for you just really quickly. Jamie Dix is backstage. Actually, I see her up on my video screen, so we're going to see if we can get that brought down, but we'll work on that. But she is backstage and can assist you with any.
Know what Jamie looked like.
Yeah, there you go. Well, now you know. This is what Jamie looks like. So we're working on that part of it, but she's also backstage. She can help out with anything that you might have, any issues with we're working with the polling software and such. Just put it in the chat and she can help you there. Everyone's muted, but use your Q&A and chat functions to contribute. And a lot of the learning comes from you. So the more you're able to share, the more you all learn from one another. There's a short survey at the end. We really appreciate your input. And you might be saying, what is this picture? Well, we have a kind of a sports theme to this one because we like to use metaphors in training. This is the Japanese National Stadium. And so one thing, and if I have anyone that's on from Japan, I just really appreciate this because one thing that Japanese fans are notorious for is being meticulous about cleaning up after the game. Like they'll go crazy, but all of these blue, like balloon things, those are trash bags. And at the end, they clean up. In fact, so much so that at, I believe, the World Cup, when they lost, when their national team lost to Belgium in football, soccer, they were the ones that left the stadium spotless. And so some housekeeping for you and a little bit of history there. Also, all the resources, the links that we're going to use, the resources, and as well as the slides, we're going to provide them to you by email. We'll get that out to you by tomorrow, as well as we're going to post this recording and the slides and the resources on our website, ccoleadership.com. That's why this is being recorded, just like the FAA has approved the NFL's request to use drones now to record during the games. However, right now, the league can only use them to film empty stadiums. But it's a matter of time before we have those buzzing all over the place as the game is live. We're going to transition in over to you, Sarah.
All right. As most of you know, we love to hear from you during these. And so we use Mentimeter as our tool to be able to do that. The easiest way to do it is to grab a smartphone, smart device so that you can enter your answers, or you can open up a second browser and go ahead and do it there. Works the same. We're going to ask you to go to menti.com, menti.com, and enter the code 761075. Jamie's got that code in chat for you as well. If you cannot put in your entry for whatever reason into Menti, you can always put it into chat, and Jamie's got you covered. She will enter it for you. And whenever we do one of these word clouds, the team or the word in the middle that is the biggest, it just means that there is one zealous person out there entering it multiple times, or multiple of you think that the Thailand Tobacco Monopoly Football Club is the greatest sports team of all time. So I just got to give a shout out to the person who put in, I don't know, sports are not my thing. I feel you. We like the honesty. We know sports isn't everybody's thing, but we also know our previous series was a music theme. This was a sports theme, because there are two areas in life where people get brought together. And a little of what this is about is bringing some leaders together. So some good ones in here, of course, are 2019 Stanley Cup winning local St. Louis Blues. Somebody put in our 2011 Cardinals. Shout out to the home teams. And then we've got the South Africa Springboks. I will tell you, my kids and Matt's kids, because we have a branch in South Africa, proudly sport Springboks winter hats. So they're the cool kids on the playgrounds with kids saying, where did you get that hat? So some good ones in there. As we move into some questions, we always periodically we ask this question because we kind of want to know who's out there, and we want to know for you all to be able to see what are the other organizations that are being represented. So just an easy one. What company do you work for? Best Buddies International. I believe you guys are in the UK. I could be wrong about that. Intradeco Clothing Company. HR Green locally here in St. Louis. MRC, another great training company. Hutton Construction Company. We got Anchor Packaging, Castle Design, American Airlines. Welcome. So you can kind of start to see the width and breadth of industries and organizations that are just represented on this little webinar that we're doing today. All right, we're talking about assessing your team. And so little frame on this webinar is we know that out there in the world, a lot of us have gone through some change. Some of you are leading new teams. Some of you have gotten additional team members. Perhaps your team does not look the same as it did. Perhaps you personally have additional responsibilities. So how do I look at the team that I have, even if it is the same one, and assess how that team is doing? One piece of that is by looking at people's strengths. And so this question that we have here is focusing on individual strengths with coaching increases retention by how much? And that answer is actually 14.9%. And so I can retain my people 14.9% more if I actually think about what are people's strengths and then give them coaching on how to align those strengths to the work that you do. And so that is where we're going to start as we think about the content for today. Another framing piece. This is our sports analogy to kick it off. Some of you may have seen the movie Moneyball or read the book by Michael Lewis, which is essentially like, how do you win the math battle of sports? So how do you actually use data to make predictive decisions in kind of the sports arena? And so this is a little kind of like that. How do I actually use data, or perhaps better framed as, how do I use what I know about people to create a better team? So we're gonna moneyball some teams as we move through this. The three areas that we're gonna address. I mentioned the alignment to strengths. We're gonna talk a little bit more about behavior tendencies. If you were with us last week, we're gonna build on that. And then we're gonna talk a little bit more globally. How do I actually assess if my team's engaged? Now, if we're in an essential business, maybe I am seeing those faces every single day and I have a sense for it. For a good chunk of us, we are still working from home. And so how do I actually kind of get the truth of what people are experiencing right now? But the first piece really is, how am I aligning to strengths? And I mentioned this first stat in the Mentimeter, that if I do some strengths-based coaching, this is what I could possibly expect. People are actually more productive. I experience lower turnover. And as a business, we experience greater profitability. So while we think this is important from a care for people standpoint, there's actually a pretty big business hook to doing some of this work. And it's easy to say, and you'll hear people say the statements like, well, you just got to, build on the weaknesses or focus on the strengths, but we don't actually define what a strength actually is. And so we break it down into these components. The first piece of a strength is talent. Those are the things that are innate in us. It's our natural aptitude. These are the things that we are born with. And so as just a very simple example, I was not born with the talent of being any kind of singer. I wish I was that talented. I am not. I could perhaps practice, I could perhaps do karaoke, but that ship has sailed, not gonna happen. I do not have that talent. So talent, innate, things that we are born, or in this case, not born with. Skill. Skill is expertise. That's my ability to do something well. These are the things that are acquired through effort. It's the things that we practice. It's the repetition. Using the sports theme, it's the drills. If I'm a footballer, I'm dribbling through the cones, whatever it happens to be. I acquire that specific skill through a lot of effort. And then we have the knowledge. That's facts, information, and we acquire that through education. If I have all of three of those and those are actually aligned, that's what builds a strength. 1, I cannot acquire. 2, I can acquire. And so a little bit more of a business example would be thinking about your very, very best salespeople. The very best salespeople, they have some innate talent. And it might not all look the same, but they're talented because they're naturally expressive. They build relationships easily. They're curious. As they move through their life, they're naturally doing this, regardless of whether or not there's a sale. They have some knowledge about product and territory and industry. And yes, they have kind of the selling techniques in the skill camp. The first piece, again, they were probably born with, and then we build on those with the skill and the knowledge, and then you have a really good salesperson. Where this, and I'm going to give this example on why this is really important from an alignment to jobs perspective. In our industry, we sell, or for our parent company, we sell capital equipment. And so we make the machines that make toilet tissue, which if you've never seen one, it is probably longer than 3 of your living rooms. So just the size and scale, scope of piece of our equipment. For some people, they are really passionate about the engineering of the machine, extremely passionate about the product. That in and of itself doesn't make a good salesperson. So do I align that person to be a product manager where I'm really thinking about how am I guiding somebody through and making sure that the machine is meeting their needs, or am I actually putting them out in the field as a salesperson? Well, I'm looking for some of those innate talents, those pieces and parts that are really, really tough to teach, and making the decision, how am I aligning that person in the business? The critical part ends up being, does that talent exist or does that talent not exist? And for some of you, you might be thinking, well, gosh, I definitely can learn new things. And yes, we can, but if it's not on a base, it's really hard for our brains to rewire new pathways. And so can I get incrementally better? Can I build on what would be classically called a weakness? Perhaps we can, but in order for it to be a true strength, it's innate. It's something that's born in me that I'm complementing with skills and knowledge. A really simple way to look at this is a pretty classic Albert Einstein quote. Everybody is a genius. Everybody has genius within them, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So are we looking at the things that people are really good at and putting them in those positions? So here's a tool for you all on how you can think about doing that. Do I have each person, and perhaps these are new team members, perhaps we're challenged to cover the business in different ways, and so I'm moving people around. Are people aligned to their area of strength? And for those that are struggling, one initial question is, do they lack the talent, the essential element that makes somebody really, really successful? Could different talents be employed or identified? Or does the talent exist? We just simply haven't given the skills and the knowledge. We haven't given the training that allows that talent to come to life. So a quick assessment that you can do for people. If you want to dig even deeper, here's 3 different options. Here's some self-reflection and feedback questions. So this is the analog option, no assessment required. You can make a list of your natural talents. You can consider how you've developed your innate talents with specific skills and knowledge. Sometimes it's helpful of ordering your strengths in terms of how often you use them at work. Are you spending 20% of your time in an area of strength or 90% of your time in areas of strength? Consider what innate talents may help you in areas that classically you might think of as a weakness. And it's always good to ask somebody who knows you really, really well for what feedback on what your strengths are. If you want to do a bigger assessment, obviously the StrengthsFinder assessment is pretty popular out there. It can give you some clues in terms of what those talents are that you can build on. And then one step deeper is employing a Leadership 360. We use Korn Ferry. There's lots of good ones out there, but those are kind of different levels of how you might start to understand what are my strengths and then how much time am I spending in those areas of strength. That's the first one, aligning our team to strengths.
And as we mentioned before, we have people on our team that do the StrengthsFinders assessment. So if you're interested in that and or the 360 with the coaching with the Korn Ferry, both are very effective. Different, but both are very effective, especially in teams that are recently joined together or have changed. Perhaps some of your team is different. It's larger, it's smaller, you've combined. This is really effective kind of teamwork. So let's work into behavior tendencies. So you might be saying, well, that's fine, but I've got the team I was given. I've got whatever talents they have, whatever strengths they might have actually built up, that's the team I've got. And maybe later on I might be able to hire differently for that, but for right now, I'm in the battle with the people that I have, which is not that different from any of my deployments or any of my work, with the rare exception, like I didn't get to build the team. I got given a team. It's almost proper English. I was handed a team. I was presented a team. And I had to work with that. So one of the ways we can do some assessments is not just in the strengths, but also in what are the behavior tendencies. Perception is a unique lens through which we all see the world. I know it almost seems like, well, it's just reality. We all see the same reality. And so let's do a little bit of exercise to show that perhaps that's true and perhaps it's a little bit different. So I'm going to bring us back into Mentimeter here. And I'm going to run this question, just first gut reaction. You arrive early on a video call. You arrive early and there's a couple other people there. You pretend like you're multitasking, but you don't engage. You don't talk. You don't go on video. You stay off video. You mute yourself. You hope no one notices, in the participant list, that you've actually joined. You're like, I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to talk to whoever's there early. Yay, people. I love you. I'm going to just start chatting with you. Or do you log off and then log on closer to the start time? I will tell you as an example, this is embarrassing. Like I'm in the 1%. I'd probably be like, that's all that's here. And maybe it would depend on who's there, but I would probably log off and maybe log on closer to the start time, which perhaps you do on these webinars and you should not, because we usually start at least 10 minutes early and play some music for you. So next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time, sign in a little early, you'll get to hear some music and we won't make you talk to anybody. All right, so a good portion of you is like, hey, I'm going to talk to whoever is there early with you. When we run this with larger groups, usually we see a scatter shot. A lot of the, hey, I'm going to stay off video and mute would be another one that we see. But in this case, about 70% of you in that area. All right, let's keep going on this perception. I'm going to show you a few pictures. As the picture comes up, I just want you to put into Menti, what's one sentence, two sentences that describes this picture? So the picture is up, and I'm going to show us what we're doing. But right now, I'd like you to just put in, what's the thing that you put in there? What's the sentence that describes this picture from your vantage point? You look at this, and the first thing you think is, and I want to give you some examples, but I want to wait. I've got about 20 of you, 24 of you filled in. So as I hide this image like this, you are going to see what people are saying. It's a mess. Yes, it's messy. It's total chaos. It's the aftermath of Thanksgiving. That's a good one. Cluttered and messy. What else do we see when you look at that picture? Yikes, who's going to clean it up? So some of you are thinking, I'm not even thinking about whether it's a mess. I'm thinking, who's going to clean it up? Some of you say disgusting. I will tell you, a lot of people would say the aftermath of a party, like this was a great time. Like the person who says, my wife isn't home. I need to invite friends over. Like you're starting to think about, well, what about all of the food? I will tell you, when we run this in large events, when we're in person, a lot of people would say, an animal got loose. Looks like the kitchen after my girls helped me cook. That's a great one. And you see some people are like, this is disgusting. And everyone, so other people are like, this was a great, like, what a great party. Okay. Or some of you, and I'm not saying you're judging, but you're like, that's a disaster zone and you are lazy. So good one. If you have trouble getting into Menti, just put it in the chat room and Jamie will put it in there for you. Next picture I want to show you here. One sentence that describes this picture. One sentence that describes this photo. You should have that up there in front of you. And after we get about 20 or so of you in, or the votes in, I'll start hiding the picture. We'll see what you are looking at. All right, so as we have those in, let's see what you all wrote. So this picture, vibrant, Picasso, beautiful art, colorful. Some of you went just right after it and said awful art. Some of you said enjoyment. Some of you said pink. That's very factual. I like that one. Pink, got it. I will tell you when we run this one, this is some of the things that we often see. One person said, I see the imagination of my child. Some people will say, I see pink art. It has 3 animals in it, and they'll just describe it very factual. Birds looking at a kangaroo. Unnatural nature, happy and colorful scene. Abstract, a wondrous color. Unconscious thought streaming, great one. A wall somewhere in a Mexican city street. Rich and vibrant. Art by a bird lover. Curious characters, really good. All right, last picture. What do you see? Describe this picture. One sentence, describe this picture. First thing that comes to mind. Try and overthink it, just the first thing. What do you see when you see this picture? All right, I'm going to hide this one. Let's see what you all wrote. Trouble in paradise. Pain, uh-oh. They are fighting. It's very factual. These two need to talk. Again, we're psychoanalyzing these two people. They're fighting, frustration, hard times. I like someone put down quarantine. That's a good one. He needs me. That's interesting. So some of you are looking at he needs me, and some of you are looking at they're fighting. Some of you said, that's just a difficult day. And some of you just went right at it and said, he just doesn't understand. Please listen. Has to be a husband and wife. It's a great one. Deciding who cleans that kitchen. I see what you did there. I see what you did there. I applaud it. Well done. Deciding who cleans that kitchen from the first one. Marriage trouble. Oh boy, I better pretend I'm a plant. I'm just telling you right now, if that's been your defensive move that you thought that's how you're going to get out of it, I'm telling you, my friend, I could help you with some coaching. Deciding to be a plant has never worked out for me, even in camouflage. Ha ha ha. Okay, here we go. So what's interesting is I run those. So we just ran these different pictures. Well, that's interesting. Really different perception, how I view the world. So what accounts for what we all just saw? So if you don't mind, just a few people put in chat right there. In the chat room, what accounts for the differences between what each one of us saw? Some of us saw a really messy kitchen. Some of us saw a party. Some of us saw an animal that got in. Some of us saw, was another one, my kids helped me cook. On the second picture, some of us saw gorgeous art. Some of us saw awful art. Some of us just saw color. Some of us saw a Mexican city wall in a street on there. Okay, your past perceptions, your experiences, interesting, perhaps, sure. Your biases, your perspectives, who we are, absolutely. All of these things are perhaps parts of why we actually see that. If we were all the same, if we all perceived these things exactly the same way, this would be a lot easier. And so we do some work in the inclusion space, and the one we always like to think about is Legos. If I'm going to create a masterpiece, or I'm going to build a team, or I'm building an organization, I probably need a lot of different pieces. But we're clearly not all the same, and we clearly have different strengths, talents, skills, knowledge, and experiences that allow us to see the world slightly differently. Sometimes that can be extremely valuable, and other times it can cause friction. But if we were all the same, this would be pretty easy. What we just witnessed was your own unique lens. And for some of us, you're like, yeah, but it wasn't that much different. Then again, for these two, this picture here, some of you saw, he needs help, he needs me. The rest of you, some of you saw, I need to be a plant and disappear. What happens is I have my profile, and so we're gonna get into that part of it, how I assess, how I process information in the world. Absolutely my experiences, what I've seen, what I've been through, my fears, what needs I have, my own self-image, perhaps stereotypes that I've grown up that were either handed to me or that I saw and I've created in my mind, and perhaps certainly my own values. What's happening here, though, is I'm not seeing this picture. I'm seeing this picture through this lens. And it colors it something. It colors it a shade. And none of these shades, none of these lenses, none of these perceptions are wrong or incorrect. They're just different. And so if I think about assessing a lineup of a team, especially if that team has changed, one thing that's really impactful for us is, can I understand we're not all seeing the same thing, and there are areas that actually contribute to this? We don't all see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, unless you're being paid handsomely as a judge in figure skating, and then you are seeing the world as money would be. That's such a terrible joke. But in judged sports, gosh, sometimes that's so challenging. And this is why we'll say things like, what was that judge looking at? Or if we want to make it more, this is more of an American kind of reference in the NFL, what was that ref not looking at? You missed the biggest pass interference call on the biggest play of the game that would have sent the New Orleans Saints to the Super Bowl. And they probably would have had a really good shot at winning. And this was egregious. Perception deception. It's the human tendency to fail to acknowledge my lens and behave as if what I saw was fact. Now, I know we're making a joke about the sports piece here. This happens very fast. Did the ref see it? Did he not? But his experiences and having watched a lot of these plays probably contribute to what did he see? What was he paying attention to? But perception deception, it's my tendency to believe that whatever I see with my own eyes is absolutely 100% fact. And we know this doesn't happen. We know that just from even asking you, what did you see with these pictures? So 2 questions real quick for you all in chat. When are you most likely to experience perception deception? That what I'm seeing actually isn't the fact, and then what behavior results? I will give you some examples. For me, if we're rushed, if we're under higher stress, if I'm communicating with someone who has a very different style, I might have this perception deception. I'll start thinking about, I'm seeing the world through my lens, and then my behavior will be, I have no idea, how could you not see it this way? I'll start to judge, I'll be a little shorter, I might start making assumptions about the person. I might think about literally judging what the behavior is and being a little more short, like just get out of the conversation. This is when I'm most likely to experience perception deception. Differences, and the behavior, the results, is certainly not leaning in, it's probably doing just the absolute opposite. And I know, Tina, you put in there your mood. Absolutely. Like when I wake up, and are we in a good mood? Have other things happened to us? And now am I looking at the world a little bit differently? Electronic communication is another great one. Email, great for facts and figures, not good for emotion. Easy to experience perception deception. Did the caps lock just get put on an accident, or are you really yelling about this? Can we really be yelling about this? Now I'm going to start judging you. Now I'm going to write you back, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even know the caps lock was on. So there you go. So that is a big piece on perception deception.
All right, and some good ones coming in times of crisis, uncertainty. I fall back into my comfort zone. It goes back to this, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, and that is what's called being human. So what if we had a little bit of a cheat sheet? And what if for the people that I influence in my span of care on my team, I could start to kind of get in their shoes just a little bit if I knew something about their behavior tendencies. So behavior tendencies is different than personality. We're not going to go down the personality road. Personality is for those familiar with a Myers-Briggs, has to do with a lot more of the deeper wiring. What we're talking about is the fact that we just all have kind of an operating system. We all have some preferences of how we like to behave. And these behavior tendencies, they're shaped by nature and nurture. So yes, how you grew up, yes, your parents and your peers and all of that good stuff, your culture, your experiences. Typically, these kind of settle in by age 16. And so over time, we'll have the same behavior tendencies, but as we mature, we kind of grow in our ability to modify those behavior tendencies. So a highly, highly chatty child will likely be expressive in adulthood. Now, as an adult, we may have a better sense of when to actually be quiet and listen. But the underlying tendency, the preference, tends to be the same. When we do any of the assessments in behavior tendencies, it's really about helping us to identify preferences, not competency, skill, or ability. So this isn't about I can do it, I can't do it. It's about what do I prefer to do. These do link to some deeper things. And so this is kind of a classic. If you're in the L&D space, you've got to have an iceberg slide at some point in time. And so the really, really deep waters is your needs and your values, kind of the things that are really, really important to you in your life. And so for me, one might be a value that I have, and I got it from growing up, and got it really from my dad. I have a value of hard work that informs my attitudes. And so I will judge people. I'll admit to this. I will definitely judge people who are or are not willing to work hard. That kind of attitude towards that leads to behavior tendencies. How am I most likely to behave? And so I tend to be a pretty structured person. I like getting things done in a particular order, and it leads to that deeper value, but that's kind of my preference for how I like to work. And then what people can actually see is the behavior. Obviously, we can't see all of that or where it came from or what that tendency necessarily is. It's really important to point out that that waterline between behavior tendencies and behavior is choice. So anytime we're talking about behavior tendencies and these types of assessments, it's always really important to say we can behave however we choose, however we would like to, but if I understand somebody's behavior tendencies or preferences, I kind of get some insight into why their behavior is what it is. Another thing that we always say a lot is all behavior is an expression of need. I can see the behavior, I can't always see what the need is. A really simple example is if we're facilitating in the classroom and somebody's sitting in the front row and their arms are crossed, I don't know if they disagree with what they're saying or if they're cold. And so from a facilitator standpoint, I'm trying to read the cues and clues. Have I lost you? Do you have a question about something, or do we need to turn the AC down? So in life, if I use a behavior tendency assessment, I start to get some clues as to what the need might be, and then I'm better positioned to form a relationship with you, communicate with you, and kind of see around the corner, get in your shoes, understand your perception. So if you were with us last week, we showed you a framework that we really love, which comes from emergenetics. And it breaks down into these 4 categories. These are the thinking styles. There are those of us that are very highly analytical. They're logical problem solvers. They tend to love data, and very, very important, they love correct data. And they will tell you when your data is not correct. And then they will ask you the source of your data. And if you say, the internet, not good enough. Not good enough
Nope.
If you're wired in the blue space.
Nope.
Conceptual is our storytellers. They start with the vision. I don't need the Excel spreadsheet. I want to talk about the idea. Our social thinkers, they literally love to think with people. They will also think really well about people. So in change, it's okay, but how is this going to affect my team? How are we going to incorporate people into this? And then our structured thinkers, as you might have guessed, I am one of them, or that is one of my strong preferences. I like to put things into buckets. Like if we can break an idea down into its subcomponents, and then I can kind of think about it. So I want you to do, we asked you last week, what was your highest? What I want you to do, and you can just do it with a scratch piece of paper and a pen, I actually want you to write down what you think your percentages are. And so if you think to 100%, are you 25, 25, 25, 25? Most likely not. But which one would you say, like, I'm mostly this, and then what's the percentage of my other components? The reason Jamie Dix is so fantastic with our chat is she is 90% red, y'all. She is 90% social. So she's going to be the person on our team that's going to say, hold on, how is this going to impact people? She's going to be the person that says, do you want to think through this? Absolutely. I'm going to hop on a call. I'm so happy to help think through it with other people. So go ahead and write down your percentages. We're going to layer on a second component to this. So these are our thinking styles. This is how I prefer to think. What are some of our behavior preferences? And so emergenetics gives us 3 of these. The first one is expressiveness. The second is assertiveness. And the third one is flexibility. And so we think of these in a spectrum of 1 to 100. And so if you think about a line of 100 people, are you the first person to talk, highly, highly expressive? Are you the last person to talk? I'm 100th in line, so to speak. Same thing with assertiveness. Like, you need somebody to be assertive, I am first in line. I am to the top, versus I'm the last. I'm the last one to do it. Same on the flexibility. So you kind of see these scales. we're going to ask you to go ahead and put this in to Mentimeter. So these are scales. And so the way I want you to do it and to think about this is a little easier to think about it as increasing. So if you're highly, highly expressive, I want you to put in 100 or 90 or 80 or 70 or all the way down to maybe I'm just like, I'm a 5 on expressiveness. Assertiveness, I am first. I'm taking charge. I'm at 100. I'm at 50. It depends. I'm at 10. I'm definitely waiting for somebody to come and go first. Flexibility, anything goes. I'm at 100, perfectly fine, middle of the road, or am I kind of towards the end? And so as these come in, obviously we have an incredibly diverse group. So you see the standard deviation all the way in the back. And this is just to demonstrate. And again, there is no right, no wrong. There's positives to every piece of this scale. But knowing is really, really helpful. So a simple way that you can just self-assess, we typically know each other pretty well. And if you think about your team, and even as simple as the expressiveness one, how do I encourage those people who are highly expressive, perhaps to listen a little bit more? And how do I encourage those people who are at the low end of the expressiveness scale to contribute their thoughts? And maybe it's not always by speaking out loud. Maybe I have to create other venues for those who are a little bit less expressive to actually contribute their smart thoughts into the conversation. The other thing that we know is that 95% of the population has more than one thinking preference. So back to those 4 colors, the vast majority of us have a couple of preferences. 35% of the population has 3 or 4 thinking preferences. So anybody who rates it 23% or higher, it counts as kind of a preference. Anybody who is like this, and this might resonate even though you haven't completed the assessment. If you, when you did that exercise, you put like, well, gosh, I'm a quarter here and a quarter here and a quarter here. What that can feel like when you're solving a problem is the committee is in session. I can think about this in a lot of different ways. And sometimes I can even have a debate with myself. And so some of us have very strong preferences in one area, but a lot of us have quite a few preferences. From a team standpoint, when we're thinking about, okay, how do I assess my team? What I want is I want a lot of diversity. I want all these different thinking styles. I want all of these different behavior preferences. I want all 4 of these thinking attributes represented so that we can kind of get the benefit or the best of all of it. It's really helpful when we have people who have multiple preferences because they can act as a translator. I know why they asked that question. They prefer a lot of structure. Perhaps we could tell that in the form of a story, because I know we have some conceptual thinkers. And so we're able to kind of translate for each other if we can understand and we have multiple preferences, so to speak. And giving you an example of what the reports actually look like, here is the cheat sheet to Matt and I, because I know you were just dying to know, well, what are your guys' preferences? And this is for a couple of reasons. One, so that you can see how the report looks if you're actually to engage with this and actually get the report done, which is really, really helpful. But as it turns out, Matt and I have exactly opposite profiles. And so when we were being debriefed by an emergenetics facilitator, she started the call by saying, you guys actually share a brain, not as in you have the same brain, but as in you have a half and you have a half. And I will tell you, this works out really, really well 98% of the time. 2% of the time, it's a complete disaster because we cannot quite see the other person's perspective, back to that perception deception. But for the majority of the time, it's actually really, really helpful because I know that Matt's going to see it. And maybe we see the same solution, but how we get there, we get a more complete perspective because we're hitting all of these different areas. So we are exactly like 2 puzzle pieces that come together to, did you like, you didn't like that?
No, I really liked it. I really liked it. And I'm disappointed we didn't spend more time on this slide because I'm just so darn proud of you for building in Optimus Prime. The number of times I have quoted Optimus Prime, told you we need to bring in Transformers, and for you to build this slide, it's just, it's a little sad. I'm so proud of you. Okay, let's talk about this really quickly because we did get some commentary. We have one of our partners who's qualified in this as an expert in it as well. Mark Maddock is with us today. So if you have any detailed question on emergenetics, put them in the chat and Mark can answer them for you. He's phenomenal at this and a partner that we work with on this. What's interesting about this is you might imagine if I don't recognize this and Sarah doesn't recognize this about herself, it makes it really challenging at times. As an example, my expressiveness, I'm on 90. That means I'm going to speak before 90 other people. Sarah's going to speak before 30 other people. If I'm not aware of this, then I know that I have to give some airtime or just be patient or just not talk so dang much so that she can. I also know that even though she's not going to say something, her assertiveness, she is in charge. She may not say it, but let me tell you something, there is no doubt you are not turning that steering wheel. So if we understand this, it's easier for us to work together. And so when she says something like, oh, it needs more structure, or I'll even say, hey, I feel like this needs more structure. And so then we'll bring Sarah in to work on this. Or she'll say, what's the idea around this? Or how would you look at the numbers? Well, I like the data and the analytical, so I can come in. This awareness allows us to build more intentional behaviors and then act as a team. And so just calling this out, and by the way, this is how we build, for those of you that enjoy these webinars, we build them with these 4 thinking styles. And if we're in person, we think about the behaviors as well. How do we get people to talk? I use Menti for people who are not as expressive. Well, this way I don't have to be expressive. I can just put it in to a third-party device. It's a good example of how we equalize all that expressiveness. See right there, I used too many words. Back to you, Sarah.
As if on cue. All right, assessments tell us how we behave when we aren't thinking, which is so, so helpful. This is my default mode. This is my operating system. This is my preference. When we think about it, we can behave any way we choose. So that's the really important caveat. This isn't an excuse. It's not justification. It's not saying that somebody who doesn't have a preference for structured thinking can't think in a structured way. It might take a little bit more energy, but we all have the capacity. But understanding that wiring, even if it's just by doing a little quick self-assessment, is really, really helpful. And so if you think about taking this back, we give you a couple of different options here. We have kind of the self-reflection and feedback. So this is the analog option. I'm always trying to give you all a tool that you can use right away. And just kind of going through this, what we just brought you through, which thinking style is well represented on your team. Do you have a bunch of conceptual, like you were in story time land all of the time? When you have the opportunity to perhaps to recruit, am I looking for somebody who is a little bit more structured? Am I balancing those things out? In which might your team need to grow? And perhaps it's just by naming it and saying, hey, we could all grow in having a little bit more structured processes, and we're going to bring that in. Does the current makeup of your team help or hinder your ability to complete your goals? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Which of the behavior tendencies are well represented? And if your gut feeling is that somebody's in the minority, from a leadership standpoint, what are you doing about it? And so it's so easy to judge and label somebody who might have a preference to be less expressive and a preference to be less assertive and say, well, I just need you to get in the game. I need you to share your thoughts. Well, perhaps, but that's not my default wiring. So I'm going to expend a lot of energy to get in there, but are we also creating systems that allow people to kind of communicate in their zone of their preference? And then, as always, how do we encourage people to flex their style? So as Matt mentioned, the ownership is a little bit on the person. If I'm a little bit more self-aware, then I can make more intentional behavior choices. 2 assessments that we like, we mentioned emergenetics, and we also do, a lot of people are familiar with DISC. We do extended DISC. I'm just going to give the shout out again, because if you would love to have your emergenetics profile done, the person that we work with, he's really brilliant, and it's the report, but it's the insight. And so it's really helpful to have a person who knows the instrument extraordinarily well sit down and kind of say, well, this is how this is going to show up. And this is how it's impacting everything from your personal relationships to work. It just makes you better. So we love that one.
Yeah, and just to say this, for our case studies in this, if we're given a senior team and we're given a call by an L&D or a CHRO or even a CEO, and that person says, man, we really have a challenge getting along. We have a challenge going through the planning process. We have a challenge with some feuding inside, almost like frenemies, like we're going to be okay, but in the end, I don't want to spend time with you. One of the first tools we're going to use is I'm going to give you some information about how each one of you processes information. And a lot of times what you'll hear, even if senior leaders will be like, I had no idea. That explains a lot about why you do that and why it's really challenging for me. And now I understand. And more times than not, our case studies show that if we can present some factual data about how we're all just wired slightly differently, and importantly, how we can modify the way we communicate, we can get that team humming along much, much faster. This is a tool that's really important for us to use. I do want to address, there's a comment that says, hey, this is really challenging because it's all contextual. It depends. It depends on what's going on. Okay, cool, yes. And at the same time, however, I will tell you as an example of me at a 90 in expressiveness. When something starts to go wrong, I don't have any problem at all going right into my default and saying, hey, I'm concerned about this. We have members of our team that are at a 10. It has to get so much worse before one of them are going to speak up and say, I have concerns about this. And if I know that, then I can back off and say, hey, do you have any concerns? So you're right, it is contextual, and also it still informs how I'm going to show up. If I'm around the 50, so for me, assertiveness is I think around a 41 or so, it totally means it depends. I'm perfectly happy not to be in charge, and as soon as it starts to go off the rails contextually, then I might step in. But I'm not the person that walks in and says, I need to take control of the situation. That's somebody who defaults to more of a 90. And it's not wrong. It's not bad. It's like oxygen to them. I want to control this to help it go right. More intentional, though, allows me to have more behavior choices. Anything to add on that, Sarah, before we transition to teams?
No, I just wanted to call out, and we'll get this website in the chat to all attendees. And I'm just so sorry, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name, but somebody put in a great strengths assessment that is free. So back on that strengths, if you don't have a code to do Strengths Finder via character, I'm personally not familiar with it, but I've heard it mentioned by other people who think it's really great. So via character.org, and we'll get that in the chat. Is another kind of free assessment that you can do that helps you understand your strengths.
We're going to go for that name, were you? Not going to try and pronounce it.
No, and I wish I could take her off mute just so that I could hear it.
I like it too. Okay, last part of this is team engagement. So we assessed our strengths, behavior, tendencies of whatever team I have, and now how can I check about the overall team engagement? All right, so we have our own proprietary survey. We built this because we were concerned about organizations that inside Barry-Wehmiller, as well as organizations we worked with, can we actually see not just the people behavior part, but some other aspects of it. So we're constantly looking at how do we get the truth of what makes our team aligned and also performing. So we built this survey. You can see this is part of the dashboard there. We talk about what the response rate is, the average rating, what are your high 5 and low 5, and what are overall ratings in these 3 categories. The 3 categories are important. A lot of surveys talk about how people behave to each other. A lot of them also ask about, do you understand the purpose, do you understand the goals? We're also concerned about how is the work aligned. All of this work about behavioral tendencies and perception deception and individual strengths, if I put you into a role that is inherently frustrating or inefficient, how the work is aligned, I'm trying to work on all of this, but I'm still putting you in a bad system. And so our organizational culture survey checks for both the people aspect, the care, the challenge, trust, and fairness, those typical things you might see, then also in the purpose, and very importantly, right into the process, how work is aligned. We've backed this both on academic research and, of course, within our own industry and in external organizations. So we're going to give you this tool, and as mentioned, we're going to give you all of these slides afterwards, but this is pretty much your COVID inquiry, if you will, or your COVID impact. So these are 12 questions we've pulled out of our survey, our Chapman & Co-Leadership Institute survey. These are the 12 questions you can ask your people to understand. How are they doing as they return? For some of you, returning back to the office. For some of you, you're an essential business. You've never stopped working. These are great questions to ask, both in trust, both in understanding of what's expected, treated fairly, so some inclusivity portions of this. Does my direct leader listen to me? I feel physically safe at work. Down there at the bottom, information is shared appropriately, and people I work with communicate effectively with one another. This is almost the greatest hits, if you will, about this. And I see that Jamie has put a little bit more information, a link to our organizational culture survey, and these, as mentioned, will provide these 12 questions for you so you can run that with your team at your leisure. Okay, so what did we go through? What to assess right now? 1, alignment to strengths. I would think who on your team is aligned to areas of strengths, who's misaligned, and who might require some development and or training. especially if you have the team that you have. And I would be thinking about this as you start to make hires as well, alignment to strengths, and then getting into number 2, behavior tendencies. How do your thinking styles represented hinder or help accomplish the team goals? When we're doing new hires or we're doing onboarding, this is one of the first things we're looking at is, how is this person wired default-wise? Again, and I want to call it what Sarah mentioned, it doesn't say this is how this person is going to behave. It says this is your preference. For myself, spending over 20 years in the U.S. military, I love structure. I don't think in that way naturally, but I love structure because it allows everybody who's creative to bring their creative forces right there like a laser focus. But without structure, we're just in dreamland. And so each one of those is really important, but an over-reliance on one, not good. And I can simply learn it. It's just not a preference of that. So behavioral tendencies, really great to know what that is in your team. And the last part is your team engagement. Are you connected to the purpose? How are your people doing the behaviors back and forth? And then, of course, are your processes, literally your work processes, how are they going? And so this is what we've brought you through. So if you want to put any questions you might have, both in chat or in Q&A, as we do that, I'm going to ask for some feedback to you from our sports analogy and our sports theme here. This is Charles Leclerc, the winner of the 2019 Formula One Italian Grand Prix. And if you want to be a rock star, an icon, just the person of the entire millennium, win driving a Ferrari at Monza in Italy. And the place goes crazy. So this is his winning. So the first piece of feedback I'd like to ask from you is back into Menti, and that is, what are you going to do differently, or what have you learned as a result of this webinar? This is not a thank you to us. It's more of a sharing to each other. What are you going to do? What was the thing that you took from this webinar that you're going to do with your team? The reason we ask this is there's some really great sharing of knowledge from all of you. We have over 100 people on this. And what people are going to do, sometimes they go, that's a really good one. Spend time surveying each team member, a lot more in the listening. Looking at the strengths as being differences, absolutely. Not jumping to conclusions, it's a good one. Certainly a lens of which I view the world, and taking the time to assess my team's strengths. Yep. And the more you think about this, the more you're looking for it. And the more we look for it, the more we find these things. And each member of the team has certain skill sets. I would be terrible in the chat room. I'd be talking about sports or music or something. Instead, Jamie's like sharing stuff and checking in. And how you doing? Great to hear from you. That takes a bunch of energy for me to be like that. And so aligning each team member to where they're naturally gifted, if you will, or where they want to lean into, really allows the team to higher perform. Research strategic thinking framework, renew my focus on recognizing and celebrating team strengths. I know this might seem like, well, we have a lot going on in the business. I would put this in the sharpen the saw category. As you all have to change teams or change work, or perhaps your dynamic has changed a little bit, these are great times to just take a little bit of time to have these discussions. The assessments we mentioned, both emergenetics and DISC, these are very quick. These aren't day-long type of batteries or intensives. These are really fast, highly, highly accurate, by the way. So when we do this kind of work, the first thing we'll ask somebody is simply read your profile and then give some feedback. Is it 90% correct, 50% correct? It's not even you. Overwhelmingly, we're in the high 90s when people get these reports back. Nope, this is the owner's manual to me. This is exactly it. If you want to do me a favor and just keep putting those in, we will download this Menti into a PDF, and we'll get that to you by tomorrow. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do, and then we'll continue to take Q&A, is I'm going to launch a poll. It'll be here in Zoom. Just really appreciate all of you putting in what you thought of today's webinar. It always helps us improve future sessions. So that poll is up. We appreciate your voting on that, and we'll take any other questions or comments from you in the chat or in Q&A. And as we do that, I'll rotate over into the last part of this, and that is, let's see what we have coming up. We have 2 more in this series. So the next one is 1 p.m. next Tuesday, 3 more in this series, Build Your Bench. So we're going to show you a tool that we use we could call it coaching, but it's really an impactful tool that will help you in both your personal relationships, but hugely in your leadership capability and organizational problem solving. Works great on sales as well. It's a huge, huge tool that's really simple. extraordinarily powerful. This would be a tool that really great military leaders would use constantly, but also integrate civilian leaders would use. There's a really great brain science part of it, so we hope you can join us next week on Build Your Bench. We'll show you how to do that, leadership to sales. Then we have Compete, Better Decisions, and Engage in Your Talent. We'll talk about adaptive change innovation. And then the last one we'll bring to you on June 23rd will be a webinar on customer service. So there you go, that's coming up. Lastly, how we can help. As mentioned, everything you saw here today, we're certified in, or we have partners that we work with. Strength Finders, Korn Ferry and Barrett on the Leadership 360s. Both of those are really good, slightly different, but both good. Emergenetics was mentioned, and DISC. We also do work on strategic planning, executive coaching. We do a lot on team effectiveness facilitation to include facilitating a response on Emergenetics or DISC. And then your leadership development online curriculum subscription. We start that bad boy on July 1. We are getting access to our virtual classroom where we're going to be presenting all of our content in small bite-sized pieces between 30 minutes and 90 minutes. All of our curriculum. We have pathways for aspiring leaders, frontline, middle management, and senior C-suite leaders. And so there is a virtual classroom that you can buy into of an organization. And then on Thursday, we are running session 2 of our inclusion course, Rethinking Diversity in the Workplace, with our partner, Fred Falker, who's really incredible, and with a really powerful class we're really looking forward to. That's from 10 to 12 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and that's going to be this Thursday, my friends. All right, we are almost up on time. Sarah is going to look through and let us know if we have any last questions, and then she's going to turn into mom and tell you to wash your hands, and I'm going to get some music ready to play.
I think I keep telling them to wash their hands week after week, so I'm going to go with eat your vegetables.
Oh, that was a good one.
Also,
it's like Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
All right, friends. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you putting the thing in. We'll see you next week. Do us a favor, too, if you don't mind. These are free. There's no charge. There's no seat limitations. So if we would, do me a favor, share on your social media. We're trying to give this to the world when they need it a lot. So share in your social media, share in your referrals. And if we can help, please reach out and contact us. Our emails are there. So, whether you're an Optimus Prime fan or whether you like Bumblebee, at least you're an Autobot and you're not a Decepticon. So roll out. See you later.